Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Oh, Felix Sater, Russia, and Comey. There's a relationship there. And Thomas, you're going to explain this to all of us. To get started, can you tell us who Felix Sater is and explain why we're seeing articles now pop up about this direct line to Russia and Putin? And also fill us in on Robert Mueller and how he's all involved in this Felix Sater unraveling.
Well, Betsy, it's very exciting. You posted on Truth News Headlines a wonderful article. There are many articles out there about Felix Sater and his connection to Trump, but they really don't want to get too far out there because he was, of course, for 12 years a Russian, an FBI, well, he's born Russian, born in Moscow, but he was a Russian spy for the FBI, and he's an American now, of course. Many Russians, of course, come and become citizens of the United States. That's why they're not our enemy and why Trump is in no way in any trouble for having associations with Russia or any of what they call the former Soviet Union satellite countries. But when we talk about Felix Sater, you're talking about a truly corrupt man. His dad works for a man that if you say his name in Russia in the same sentence as Putin, you might as well just sign your death warrant. The most corrupt of all of the Russian billionaire oligarchs, I dare not even say his name, let's just call him by his first name, Semyon. He is the best friend of Sater's dad. He was Sater's father, Felix Sater's father. Of course, they changed their name, but he used Sater, and he also tried to change it to Sater to get out of being recognized as being the Felix Sater. But his dad was connected to the worst of all of the oligarchs in Russia. And his dad was in America, and he was basically one of the major players of the Russian mafia in America. And of course, the home of that is in New York. And the way that they try to launder money is through real estate. We've said this again and again. Trump was raised in a pool of man-eating sharks. And so when you talk about Felix Sater, you can't practically say his name without saying Michael Cohen, the lawyer for Trump, who was also a street-brawling, street-fighting lawyer. That's who Cohen is, of course. Sater is a real estate developer. He also was a broker on New York Stock Exchange at one point. But basically, he's as crooked as he can be. He's as crooked as his dad. And so what? Yes, here's what Trump's association with Felix is basically this. He said, bring me deals.
Before we get too far ahead, there may be people who are listening to this that are wondering why we're talking about Felix Sater. Can you give us bring us up to speed before you deep dive into it?
In the Russian investigation into Trump-Russian collusion in connection to the American election, which is a fraud, of course, it is they're subpoenaing all kinds of people. Paul Manafort's house, they actually stormed in the wee hours of the morning to get basically information on his real estate deals. Paul Manafort was another Russian connection, supposedly, directly to Trump. They were accusing. First off, you hear the most about Paul Manafort, and somehow Paul Manafort and General Michael Flynn both were fired because Trump was told that they were under investigation. The second that he was told that, literally within 2 days on both of them, they were both out of his campaign and giving him any advice. Also, Carter Page, who was a Russian advisor to Trump, but only slightly, never actually, I think, even spoke to Trump. He also left the campaign just because of Russian associations or because they kept coming in and saying, your people are connected to Russia. Well, so what? The Obama administration was more connected to Russia than any administration ever before. So Felix is so corrupt. It's the article that you have on Truth News Headlines goes through his whole history and all of the associations he's had with Trump, which are very few. But Robert Mueller recently, it's kind of hard not to spread out in trying to describe who Felix is because he knows everybody. He's involved in all the deals, everything from arms deals for the CIA. He worked for the CIA. He worked for the FBI. He's a Russian businessman who wants to be like Trump. He wanted to become the ultimate New York real estate deal maker. But he's made deals in all kinds of countries with all kinds of people, some of whom are criminals. And his father, of course, is one of the most noted criminals in Russia who has moved to America. This is not uncommon. In fact, Eric Snyder, the Attorney General of New York State, gets money, as well as Rubio, 1.25 directly to Mitch McConnell's super PAC, to Kasich in Ohio. Many people get money from Russians who have become American citizens. The one I'm speaking of is Leonard Blavatnik, who has given money to Eric Snyder, the largest amount you can, to the campaigns of all these people, but also to their super PACs, basically arming them with as much money as they need. And who is Eric Snyder in relationship to Robert Mueller? Robert Mueller's investigation has umbrellaed out to include the investigations of Eric Snyder into the very nefarious works of Felix Sater. Felix Sater was so stupid that when he worked with the mob, he kept records and he put them in a duffel bag. And when he didn't pay his bill on the storage unit and he had some guns in there, the owner, getting ready to throw stuff out, called the police and said, "There's some guns in here." They came, they found these records, and they put a bunch of mobsters in jail. So he's been protected. He can do no wrong. They send him into all of the former Soviet Union countries to try to penetrate, to find out about who are part of the Russian mob, the Russian mafia, and who are simply the new billionaire oligarchs who are buying political influence in this country. So we said this from the beginning, and this is the reason this is so very important, because now we have to bring in the fact that, of course, Robert Mueller is there to protect Comey. Now he's there to protect Eric Snyder and his investigations into all the Trump family dealings. So the Attorney General of New York State has gone after Trump since 2012, nonstop, and all of his family. He hates him. He's being paid by opposition. That's where he gets his political donations, the largest donations he gets.
You've got a lot of he's in here. A lot of he's, and Snyder. I'm not sure who you're talking about. So Eric Snyder is who?
The loudest complainer about Trump. He's a vicious tweeter trying to bring Trump down.
And who is he?
Who is he? He's the Attorney General of New York State.
Okay, I just wanted you to state that because people listening need to know that.
He controls the two most corrupt lawyers in America. Those would be the U.S. federal attorneys for the Eastern and Southern District, which are directly controlled by the Attorney General of the state of New York. Well, Felix Sater and all the corrupt New York business deals all go over the desk of these lawyers who are... Loretta Lynch gave Felix Sater... She sealed the records concerning him ripping off people in the stock market with penny stocks, a manipulation that is as old as the hills. $40 million he ripped people off for. 12 years he was in court over this issue. Those 12 years he made them their asset for the FBI, for the CIA, to get into the mob, to get into the mafia, and then turn state's evidence. So he is number one weapon of James Comey. And now in January, James Comey...
Hold it. So you're saying that Felix Sater works for James Comey?
Absolutely.
Can you be specific about that before we move to this next point?
He also works for Loretta Lynch. That's the reason she gave him basic immunity and sealed his files. And after ripping off people for $40 million, he had to pay a $25,000 fine.
And when you say he works for them, we're not going to find them on the DOJ or the FBI payroll. Where do we connect those dots that he is working for Comey and Lynch?
All you have to do is listen to his words. He is a propaganda minister, basically. He's a deal maker. He calls himself a deal maker. He has proctored deals for the U.S. government for arms in different countries. He will proctor deals to basically steal oil from former Soviet Union countries like Kazakhstan. These are all historic records. He has the most colorful and filled rap sheet that I've ever seen. He was under investigation all the way back to the time when he got into a fight with someone and had to go to jail for a year because he took a martini glass and cut up his face. This is a man who threatens anyone who gets in his way with death.
But
with
he's
torture.
protected by... Totally protected by Comey and Lynch. All right, so you got this thug out there. He works for Comey and Lynch. And so what is his relationship to Trump and Russia?
When Comey, as we have discussed so many times before, set out his attempts at his October surprises, Comey led the attack of the Democrats against Trump in his oppositional propaganda that started off with the fake DNC hacking. When they knew that they had had a leak, they called it a hack. And with the help, we've described this so many times, I'm not going to get into the details.
But people may not have heard this before, so.
Okay, well, when the DNC hack supposedly happened, there was no hack. It was a leak. Both times it was a leak. That's now been proven. That's the reason they won't let any of the servers be looked at. Well, it was Alexandra Chalupa, who is a member of the Atlantic Council, which is the number one NATO propagandizing committee, completely, not for profit. They get to say whatever they want. She came up with the idea of how to basically do damage control. And so they came up with the concept of taking over Fusion GPS's oppositional propaganda against Trump that was requested by Republicans and Democrats and finally literally paid for by the FBI, by Comey himself. So Fusion worked with Orbis, which is a British counterintelligence agency, and they came up with the Trump dossier. So here they go. Unfortunately, it all came out too early for a variety of reasons. So Comey is such a blunderer. He had the following things in place. The fake story that the DNC was hacked. And later added to that the fake story that the DNC hacking had something to do with Hillary losing the election. Then he came up with the idea of, and he paid Franklin Foer to create the Trump Tower computer nonsense. There was no computer in Trump Tower that was connected to a Russian bank. Complete nonsense. It was a publicity agency that was working for Trump Towers. Then they came up with the Trump dossier. Well, the Trump dossier accuses his lawyer, Michael Cohen, of being the direct connection to Russia. And so Michael Cohen is a close friend of Felix Sater. They don't want to point out who Felix Sater is. But Felix Sater, because he's been a propagandist, opens his mouth so much and says so many crazy, crazy things that there's no way to keep it underground. He was supposed to do that, but then he goes way too far. So Michael Cohen gets called in the Trump dossier, the person who is making the direct money connection to the Trump Tower computers. And supposedly his lawyer is being paid by Putin through the largest bank in Russia to be Putin's puppet. Oh boy, this is really great. All of that is complete nonsense. So the Trump Tower computer, the dossier, complete nonsense. Later, the DNC hacking was into the election. Later, they even said that there was hacking into the election. 21 incidents of hacking. No, there were no incidents of hacking into the election. And Barack Obama himself, his last words coming out of his mouth as he left on the day of the inauguration was, the Russians meddled in the election, but they did not change one single vote. So therefore, the Mueller investigation is fake. Why is the Mueller investigation going on? And why is Felix Sater being hidden? Because Felix Sater knows all the truth. And he's an idiot. He'll go before the Senate committee, open door, closed door, doesn't matter. He'll admit all of these things. And he point blank says in the article that you put on Truth News Headlines.
And I'll also post it in the comment box on this YouTube video.
He says there was no Trump collusion with Russia. I wish there was. I tried to get Trump towers in Moscow. Didn't work out. I tried to get Trump towers in Georgia, which is taken over by Russia, and $1 million was spent up front because Trump had said to Felix Sater when he came to his office, because Felix Sater loved Trump. He wanted to be like Trump. He had an office just below the floor of the Trump organization in the Trump Towers, because he wanted to be just like Trump. He wanted to run into Trump. He couldn't get anybody to introduce him to Trump. Finally, one day he accidentally gets introduced to Trump. Trump calls him in and says, yeah, I want to talk to you. Bring me deals. That's the only thing he ever really said. And so he brought him the Soho deal, and that was from Kazakhstan billionaire oligarchic money. Everybody should know this. We have pointed this out a long time ago. Everybody should know that, yes, all you have to do is just Google these things. This is public knowledge, been in the newspaper over and over, been in the news over and over again. And you would be silly not to know these things.
Another great place to find out this information is to go to our website, aimfortruth.org, and type in these words in the search bar, and the articles that have been written, the citizen intelligence reports, will come up and you can read them there.
So Michael Cohen distanced himself from Trump the second that there was an allusion to him in the Trump dossier. But he took his passport and showed pictures of it to show he's never been in Czechoslovakia or Prague, and he never had any connections with the Russians there. But did he have connections with Russians? Oh, heavens, yes. Every good New York lawyer better have connections with Russia and the former Soviet Union satellite countries, or they're foolish, because that's where the big money is. Everybody knows this. Look at Frankfurt, look at London, look at New York. All of the Russian and former Soviet Union satellite countries spend their money not in offshore accounts, because they know those are going down. We've already seen that the U.S. is attacking those offshore accounts, so they put it into real estate. All you have to do is just, if you're reading anything in any news source, think back: billionaires, oligarchs, Russians, real estate. Now, Trump is the biggest real estate man in terms of personality in the world. So why would he not have associations with Russians, Kazakhstanis, Uzbekistanis, and all of the oligarchs who have privatized what used to be a communist country? And the people who are the people of privatization are usually Goldman Sachs getting a piece of the deal, or other banks. And they set up the deals for privatization, and they make people like Simeon, the richest of Putin's billionaire oligarch friends, who was the personal friend of Felix Sater's dad. That means Felix Sater has to know this man. If you even mentioned his name, you can die. That's the kind of mafia going on in Russia.
Well, was Sater getting directions from Comey to do what he was doing?
Oh, I forgot to tie that together.
Thank you.
Yes, because, you see all these things that Comey did, all these supposed October surprises. Clearing, one of the October surprises was to completely clear Hillary Clinton of her email crimes.
Before the interviews and the investigations.
I think we were yelling about that. I know I was yelling about that.
He sounds more like
from
a
the
Jesuit.
beginning.
He sounds like more like a Jesuit. Isn't that what they do?
He's using Jesuit subversive tactics.
Yes.
Absolutely. This is counter-espionage. This is counterintelligence. This is the worst of the worst, because when you say counterintelligence, you trump even national security. You trump the president. The president doesn't know all the counterintelligence activities going on. He can't. That would compromise the entire thing. He writes an executive order allowing them, and they go on. Just like many of the things still going on, partially because he doesn't know it. You cannot be briefed in all that is going on in the thousands of agencies and the small rooms that are moving around billions of dollars for these kind of things. And so every one of the 17 U.S. intelligence agencies, especially counterintelligence, is very interested in Felix Sater, had been monitoring him, had been monitoring Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort, who had worked in Ukraine for Yanukovych, and is such a miracle man that after Yanukovych, through the Orange Revolution, was overthrown, of course that's Soros and the CIA when I say Orange Revolution, he came back and won again as the president. And then he was overthrown again by another Soros CIA called Euromaidan Color Revolution. And the man who brought him back was Paul Manafort. He was paid $27 million. As we have pointed out before, and some anonymous patriots do not agree with this, but I personally have said Paul Manafort is the low-hanging fruit that will go down because of his real estate deals with 11 million of that 27 million. Now, there's also part of the 27 million missing. And then there was, of course, basically the DNC concocted ledgers that showed Manafort was paid illegally from a wrong fund when he worked for Yanukovych, and trying to show that Manafort, because he worked with Trump, was bad. Oh, wait, let's remember, Manafort got Gerald Ford elected. He got Ronald Reagan elected. He got George Bush Sr. elected. He then worked on and was an advisor to most of the campaigns, and he's one of the most powerful lobbyists in the world, not just Washington, D.C. That's who Trump hired. Is he corrupt? There were 5 investigations of Manafort going on at the time that Trump hired him. Trump did not know that. At the time, Trump has had no real associations with Felix, per se, Sater, except get me deals. And Felix got the deals from Kazakhstan for the Soho Trump Towers. But that's incidental. That was through a company called Bayrock. And it was one of these front companies that Felix Sater set up, which was simply taking money from Russians and Kazakhstanis, but usually hiding it if it's from Russians. Because when the Russian money went to London, and there were billions of dollars worth of real estate bought literally in the heart of London, what happened? Vladimir Putin either arrested, imprisoned, or killed those people. When they were taking money and putting it in offshore accounts, what did he do? Seize the money and put them in prison.
Okay, so let's go back to Comey's relationship specifically to Felix Sater. I don't know that I'm getting that question answered.
I know, I keep drifting. I'm very, very sorry, Betsy. I'm very concerned about this recent thing because the way that it's come out, it's completely painted the opposite direction. It's painted to make it look as if Felix Sater could be, but we're never going to say it, could be the absolute proof, the smoking gun, that there was a Trump connection to Russia and to Putin. Now, does Felix Sater have a connection with Putin? No, he wishes he did. Did Felix Sater ever do that? No, he says in his own words he didn't. He wishes he did. But the big deal is the following. He came up with a peace plan, and he met with Michael Cohen in January after Trump was elected, and also another man, Artemenko, who was a major friend of his as well as a major political oppositional propagandist. And they sat down, and supposedly, though Michael Cohen says this is not true, this is complete BS, 100% a lie, and his long-standing friend Felix Sater is lying. Well, Felix Sater is noted to be a liar on more counts than anyone can add up. But supposedly, Felix Sater, and he brags about this in the press at that time, he says, I wrote a peace proposal for Ukraine. And it said, if Russia would withdraw from Ukraine, then the sanctions would be lifted. Is this beginning to sound familiar? Sanctions? Michael Flynn, Cohen handed the letter to Michael Flynn, is what Felix said. Lie, never happened. But wasn't Michael Flynn fired because supposedly Intercept information said that he talked about sanctions and lifting those sanctions with Russians? Oh, here we have a peace plan that was written proudly and announced to the public as Comey's very last deal. We thought Comey's last deal was going to be the release of the information of the Donald Jr. meeting with the Russian lawyer as well as Artemenko. He shows up everywhere, and that meeting supposedly was partially arranged through Felix Sater. So that was simply a setup to make them look bad, as if they were going to get secret information. The information they could have gotten from the 3 books and 5 movies that have been made upon Hillary Clinton. They didn't need to go to a secret meeting with Russia or any Russian contacts. But that was one. And then you see, at the same time, there was the Trump Tower computer, then there was the dossier, then there was the DNC leak, then there was the Russian hacking, and then later, even after the election, comes out the Donald Jr. meeting and then comes this one.
So you're
it's
saying,
the final Comey attack on Trump.
These are all signatures these all have Comey signatures on them.
100%. They were all ordered
events
by the FBI.
They were, including Felix Sater, and this seems to be their last gut attempt to take Trump down with this Russia narrative.
And just simply go back to the timeline we created before, which followed the money, and you will see that all of this stuff is in fact well known. It was even known at the time. It's just been so glossed over because people are so subliminally controlled to think that Trump is evil, they can't hear the truth.
Well, even if you don't believe that, it's quite confusing to get all of these people and players and places all in order. All right, I want to go back now to the Attorney General of New York, because I have heard that, or I've read that one of the tactics that Mueller is using is to try to get state charges put upon Trump or the people involved with this so that Trump cannot pardon them.
Remember, Trump was going to run for president before he did this time. People don't realize that. The second that he did that, he was attacked, and every company he has, every holding, all of his family was attacked and has continuously been attacked openly since 2012 with tweets that state, basically insinuating that Trump is guilty in all of these things before there's even investigations. Eric Schneiderman, he has been brought into the Mueller investigation. Why did they do that? Not only to cover Felix Sater, and because they've given him immunity. They've sealed his court cases. You can't find out anything about him. The last court case he went to, during the middle of it, they said, okay, we adjourn, we have to go into closed door. You're not going to find out the truth, but he's a jerk, and he goes out and he says all this stuff. Part of what he says, he's been told by Comey to say, and part he wasn't. So, did Felix Sater try to get Trump Towers established in Moscow during the election? Heavens, yes, that was Comey's suggestion to him, but it was also directly in line with what Felix would have been doing anyway, you see. Did he write a peace proposal that was then made public so that it would then be connected to lifting the sanctions? But it had to go through back doors. Michael Cohen, General Flynn, to Trump. Trump never got that. But you can read it, folks. It's out there in the public because this jerk, Felix Sater, told everybody.
Are we going to see another Comey surprise?
This was Comey's last surprise.
Is this the last one?
Hopefully, but no. We're going to see Mueller give Comey
a pass?
A free pass. Because Mueller was brought in to cover up the crimes of the people who were involved in these things. Have you seen Susan Rice answer for her unmasking?
No, we have seen nothing.
Have you seen new What I like?
We have not seen Hillary's emails. We have seen diddly squat.
Larry Klayman said it the other day that the Department of Justice has been crippled. It doesn't have the manpower and the lawyers they need. The old Obama hangovers are doing things the way that the bureaucrats and the deep state have been doing them forever. Mueller's been called in to hide the crimes. We don't think that they'll find anything with Trump because there never was. There were already 2 investigations before this one, so why do they think a third one would find something? You know, Betsy, you're so right. Because what we see here is that last Comey surprise. And it's so funny that Comey should be in jail right now. He doesn't need to go through a trial. All of America witnessed his perjury, just like with Hillary Clinton. They don't need a trial. They perjured themselves, and they should be put in jail without bond because who knows where they will go. And both of them, of course, have offshore accounts in lots of places in foreign countries all set up, just like Obama does. So what we're seeing with Comey is going to walk. Or what the worst thing, as we have predicted, what will happen is they will say, you perjured yourself. And then he'll say, oh, my, I'm so sorry. I'll take that. And he'll be let off. And we won't find out about Felix Sater. We're not going to find the truth out about Paul Manafort. Does anybody say that Paul Manafort was part of the largest election corruption before now in U.S. history with Daddy Bush, with George Bush Sr.? Is anybody going to talk about the Mexican oil money that went to him and that was then basically built into the election fraud as an institution? There's an institution of election fraud going on here. So if Trump is being investigated for election fraud with Russia, all the rest of the election fraud is going to come out. And that's the Trump effect. They attack him. The harder they attack, the harder it comes back at them. So Mueller is, of course, illegally leaking all this stuff. As we know, practically every day there's a leak from Mueller, and it's all a distraction, folks. They are not going to look at the truth of the matter. They're not going to look at Felix Sater, even though he's the loudest spokesman. He's so anxious to stand up and admit and say to the world that he's done all of these things because he loves Trump, and he's a complete imbecile when it comes down to it. He and his dad have been caught in so many crimes that they can't even be listed. They had to be clustered together as every type of crime you can imagine with money, and with money laundering, billions, tens of billions in money laundering, fraud, extortion, corruption, whatever you want to name, real estate fraud, securities fraud, you name it. That's who you're talking about there. Does any of that come up? No, that's going to be now hidden. And what you said is right. Will Paul Manafort be given a presidential pardon because he did not file a form that John Podesta and Tony Podesta and Larry Summers and others did not file, which is that they were working for a foreign agency. In the end, in the final analysis, we still stand with what we said before. Paul Manafort will be charged with some kind of real estate fraud because he took money from a foreign country that he didn't claim, blah, 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 didn't pay taxes on, whatever. Some tiny, tiny IRS little itsy-bitsy crime. Will Felix Sater come to justice with all the horrible things that he's done, including arms trades and other horrible things, outright ripoffs and laundry? No, he's being protected. He's a Comey asset. Will Franklin Forer, who came out with the Trump Towers computer, ever be prosecuted? No. Where did he get the money? Just look at the money, folks. When you look at the money, you'll see it. Is Trump going to say to Felix, he took every deal that Felix brought him, but not personally. So Felix brought hundreds of deals. Only one of them ever really panned out, and that one failed and went bankrupt because of the collapse in America. So Manafort will probably get a small crime charged against him. Carter, nothing. Flynn, nothing. Trump, of course, nothing. And the Jared Kushner, well, there are some dealings with Kushner. Kushner may be forced out of the White House because of if part of the $1 million in Georgia went into Jared's pocket, and it probably did because he was the developer there, he could be charged with not filing that, and he may be shamed enough to step down. But I don't think there's going to be any major turnover. And as most people say, this is going to take 3 years. Matter of fact, if this is done before the next election, I'll be surprised. And 3 years is probably a very, very quick schedule for all that has to happen, especially since Mueller has hired 16 lawyers. And one of them, I love this one, one of them is and this is the reason that Eric Schneider got involved in the state of New York. And
is it Schneider or Schneiderman?
Schneiderman, excuse me. Schneiderman. Schneiderman got connected because of all of the crooked dealings that were done both with Paul Manafort and with Sater in New York City. And with the fact that with that, they can do as you say. This is a state investigation, not a federal investigation necessarily. So they're using the feds. They're going to get state crimes against Kushner or the Trump family for this or that little tiny thing. But he's as clean as can be. They've already investigated him once and said he's completely clean, so is his dad. So Trump himself is clean. His family, okay, maybe they'll get a little bit because, yes, they went to Moscow and they toured to see if they could put a Trump Tower there. They went to Georgia. Yes, they did. They went to India. They went to Malaysia. They went to practically everywhere on the earth. And guess what? That's not a crime because the former Soviet Union, they like to say, is Russia. No, it's not. Those satellite countries, like Kazakhstan, are independent. And they don't even like Russia in most cases. So it is false, and the narrative is false, and we still stand with the fact that we say and have said that Manafort is probably the only person who's going to go down, and that all the rest of the garbage is going to be hopefully swept under the rug so that Mueller himself can come out of this without being charged with crimes himself.